Good morning. Welcome everyone to our session on lessons learned from ground zero. We'll be sharing insights from various different earthquake disasters across geographies, including Japan, Morocco. I think we might also have a few insights that we're sharing from the Afghanistan earthquake that happened a couple of years ago, 2022. And of course, the most recent devastating earthquake disaster in Turkey. I'm joined today, I'm Sabine Kast. I'm a senior principal at Miyamoto International. And I'm joined here today with very esteemed speakers that I'm very pleased to introduce you to, including Professor Akira Wada, who is joining us online and will be our first speaker of today. Dr. Akira Wada is a doctor of engineering and Professor Emeritus from Tokyo Institute of Technology. Professor Wada's area of interest includes seismic engineering, seismic isolation, vibration control structures, and space structures. A very, very interesting fact is that Professor Akira Wada was part of the research team that invented the buckling restraint brace, one of the most formidable innovations in improving the structural safety of buildings. Professor Wada is highly recognized for his contributions in seismic engineering and has received several notable awards for his work with collaborators, including the prize from the Architectural Institute of Japan in 1995 and in 2003, and the IIG Grand Prize in 2019, amongst many other awards. Professor Wada is the president of the Japan Society of Seismic Isolation, the chairman of Japan's Academic Network for Disaster Reduction, and an academician of the Japanese Academy of Engineering. Well, it will be very exciting to learn from Dr. Akira's experience reducing risk around the world and witnessing many earthquake disasters. We're also joined by Dr. Kip Miyamoto. Kip Miyamoto is the CEO of Miyamoto International. He received his PhD from the Tokyo Institute of Technology and also is a seismic safety commissioner for the state of California. It's also a fact, the longest running seismic safety commissioner for the state of California, surpassing many different administrations. We're also joined by Dr. Kimura Maguro. Dr. Maguro is a dean and professor of the Interfaculty Institute in Information Studies at the University of Tokyo. Dr. Maguro is also an alumni of the University of Tokyo, where he completed his PhD in 1991, and since then has made significant contributions, including being a founding member of Tokyo's International Center for Disaster Mitigation Engineering, and then later serving as the director of International Center for Urban Safety Engineering, which forms part of the Institute of Industrial Science of Tokyo. Professor Maguro has a wide range of research fields from engineering, including urban safety, from structural and non-structural measures, to comprehensive disaster risk mitigation, including sort of social systems and policy. Professor Maguro has developed several new models whereby the behaviors of buildings can be simulated and analyzed, but is also a specialist in policy making, as mentioned earlier, for disaster management, and has proposed many important social systems and policies, both pre and post-disaster. His contributions in academia and practice extend well beyond Japan. Professor Maguro has helped establish several research organizations in developing countries, many of which are very famous, such as NSET in Nepal, to support these countries in reducing risk. It's going to be very, very exciting to learn from Dr. Maguro about lessons learned from from three large earthquake disasters in Japan. And last but not least, we have the incredible pleasure of being joined by Mr. Mustafa Yasin today from AFAD. AFAD is the Turkish Disaster Risk Management Agency, and Mr. Yasin is the head of the development department and has been very deeply engaged in, of course, the response efforts to the most recent earthquake, as well as now sort of the early recovery efforts. And we'll be learning sort of lessons learned from ground zero. So without further ado, we would like to start the session with Professor Wada, and I'll be helped by Kit to bring him online.
May I start?
Professor Wada, please share your slides.
Yes. Could you?
Beg your pardon?
Yeah, Professor, please go ahead.
It's okay. Thank you very much. Very kind introduction, Sabine and Kit. I'd like to make very small, short presentation. Ductility is damage. More than 20 years ago, Professor Viterbo Bertero presentation, he said ductility is damage. Structural engineers like ductility, but people don't like damage. Okay.
Professor Wada, 1 second, please. We're having some technical challenges so hopefully we'll get those resolved shortly.
Could you see? Is it okay?
Yes, we can see you. See you now.
Yes, may I start?
May? Yes? Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sabine and Kit. My name is Akira Wada, and very kind introduction. Thank you very much. More than 20 years ago, Professor Viterbo Bertero, University of California, Berkeley, presented in Italy. He said, ductility is damage. The structural engineer like ductility, but the people don't like damage. And this is a 7-story apartment building after Kobe earthquake. You can find many cracks on both ends of the beam. But column will be okay, and the beam column joint has some X-shaped cracks. This result expected structural engineers, researchers, and the government people. But after big Kobe earthquake, people don't like to live this damaged building. They demolish this apartment. I did this test more than 20 years ago. You can find many cracks and the end of the beam, many cracks, fracture cracks. Structural engineer like this, but the people don't like damage. The professor Steve Main, he is a student of Viterbo Bertero. He showed me this slide. When the car maker designed the cars, designed to protect life in extreme event, some kind of car accident, but the damage is expected. People's life will be okay, but the car will have damage. They have to buy new cars after an accident. But there are so many buildings designed by ductile frame in the big city. After earthquake, people cannot live damaged buildings. Many buildings have to be demolished. The city life will be killed by this earthquake. Last year, February, in Turkey, there are many buildings which has same cracks. And one city, no one stay in big city. It's very difficult. Okay, next we have to use seismic isolated or damping structure. I recommend strongly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Wada. Very sobering presentation. Very true that probably the biggest lesson learned after an earthquake is that the building code doesn't really protect property. The International Building Code is designed to save lives, and society expects better. Society expects if you have a building, if you purchased an apartment in a newly constructed building, that the International Building Code or the building codes will protect your property and not just your lives. However, damage, these buildings are designed to sustain damage, and to protect lives, but a lot of property damage and a lot of economic loss is expected after an earthquake. Thank you so much, Professor Wada. Next, we will hear from Dr. Kip Miyamoto on lessons learned in Morocco, Afghanistan, and recently in Turkey. Over the last year and a half, Dr. Kip Miyamoto spent a lot of time in those countries, supporting sort of the early the response and then also the early recovery efforts. So we greatly look forward to hearing from his experiences on the ground.
Sounds good? Okay, it's actually Afghanistan, not Morocco. All right, but actually there's a similar kind of things going on, so I can kind of touch the Morocco situation also at the same time. Just a little bit about our company. We're a global engineering humanitarian company located in about 30 different locations. As you can see, we're in a so-called area of red zone. And we worked on about 120 different disasters in the past several decades. So not only we just visit the sites, but also in many cases we stay there to work on a recovery and reconstruction effort. 2020 Afghanistan earthquake, this is a remote area. It's actually southern eastern border of Afghanistan to Pakistan, and it's a high mountain area. It's politically very unstable per se, because that's where the Taliban originated from. So it's not an easy place to operate. But this event caused the 100,000 people homeless and killed thousands of people and destroyed tens of thousands actually housing constructions. So there we did an assessment from both the remote and also on the ground. First we just looked at remote assessment using satellite images, and we estimate about 17% of a building structure, which is mainly residential construction, is damaged heavily or collapsed. About 50% of it is damaged, but still repairable. That's how we identified that. And the 30% is still okay. So from this, we actually focus on how we can get back to people back to home as fast as possible. That's actually a really important aspect of it. So this particular case, we focused on repairable structures. You know, talking about the 50% of building stock. Residential stocks can be occupied really quickly if that thing is repaired. So here's the typical construction look like. It's amazing construction. It's a clay construction, and it's a vernacular. This is how this area developed the construction system like that. And one thing we noticed that as we go through, so our assessment is not only just remote, but also on the ground. And first we do a remote assessment using satellite image, then we get into the more details by the on the ground. And so verify that, you know, how it's happened to it. But we noticed that actually many of this clay construction performed really well, and this very high intensity earthquakes. And that's something we want to kind of get into details of why it's happened. So how we can actually use their knowledge and per se technologies developed over the millenniums to able to withstand seismic, you know, hazard, and how we can actually use it now. Now this is the so there's a wall. It's a compound wall structure. Has a very high wall. It's about 5 meters high, and that was acting as a bearing wall, which means supporting this roof structure. And the problem is that when the roof structure collapsed, that's how people died. It's got a really heavy clay overlay on the roof because of the insulation they put over the years. But if they're built right, this particular case like that, it's essentially bearing of the roof beam is embedded into the wall. So it's actually when the wall is back and forth, it's act as almost like a friction damping devices, by the way. You know, so we saw a lot of evidence of that, the stable mechanism of this particular construction. So we actually brought this expert from France to really see what type of clay they have. And he was really amazed at how, that's what he calls cigar test, by the way. So he makes a whole bunch of little clay sample like that and see that how long that, I guess, clay can hang, in a sense. So that's what he's testing. He was very excited by the fact that this particular specimen had almost 20 centimeters can go down to it. So it was pretty amazing. And also that he noticed that there's a lot of smaller aggregates or stones naturally embedded into this clay. That's caused a lot of cohesiveness to it. So findings here is if it's done right, if the construction is using the really traditional approach from the waterproofness of the clay system to how to mix the clay, how to harvest the clay, and how to actually roof purling or roof beams embedded into the walls, it's performed really well. It's actually that we did a lot of what we call nonlinear time history analysis to see the robustness of the system. It's actually very stable up to about 0.5 G, which is very high acceleration, by the way. It's a very stable mechanism. It's a rocking mechanism back and forth. That's how absorbed energy. So based on the discoveries, we come up to key technical messages. Something very simple, such as make the roof thickness thin, such as make sure the waterproofness there in both wall and the foundations, and with a major training system like that, from adults to the kids, everyone. I think one was this is a very successful program, you know. I think a lot to do with we respect the cultural norm of this particular area, respect and understand how people build things. Because one of the UN agencies actually, they had a different idea. They brought in large concrete boxes in the middle of nowhere to make people live. Well, they had three issues. One is that they're really expensive, so it's not like people can replicate the system because there's no access to get the concrete or rebar bed, go up there in such a remote area. And two is it's destroyed a kind of a social structure. As you saw the first picture, people live in a huge compound system, which is like a 10,000 square feet, about 1,000 to 2,000 square meter compound. That's where the multi-families live in there. Women's actually, their privacy is very, very important. It can't be seen by the public. So be in a compound wall like that, it's actually, women can live. But what this one agency did is they built a whole bunch of like individual houses. So what women cannot live there. So even this today, we saw that actually the women population are living in some of the mountains with a tent, surrounded by it. So it's very important to understand that not only technical solutions, what's right and what's wrong, but also understanding of the cultural, this norm. I think that's very important things we found. And this is a very similar thing we saw in a sense, the Morocco too. They do have a lot of the similar type of construction system, but mainly used in the rocks. So just try to really extract the knowledge of the local and what works, what didn't, and try to use that. Now, Turkey. So last year, this magnitude is 7.8 and 7.5. That's one of the largest earthquakes I have ever seen. And you're talking about affecting a huge area, somewhere between 500 kilometers long to about 200 kilometers wide, just a large area affecting almost 40 million people. This is, in fact, probably the biggest, one of the worst disasters I've seen for the past 30 years, just incredible disaster. This is a picture from Hatay. Impact, 40 million people affected. We lost about 50,000 people, and 4 million people displaced, and almost 10% of the GDP is affected. In affected area, about 1.7 million buildings, which we analyzed based on satellite image. And based on the from on-the-ground assessment to satellite image combination of it, we noticed about 35,000 buildings, which is 2% of buildings are collapsed, about 200,000 buildings, and they're usually mid-rise buildings, by the way, some between 3 to 8-story buildings, and I have the somewhere between 10 to 20, sometimes 50 families, units live there. 200,000 buildings is damaged, and 500,000 buildings are lightly or moderate damaged. So you're talking about almost half of building stock is affecting 7 million people here. So it's a very, very significant damage. So why this happened? Number one, Turkish does have probably one of the best building code in the world as far as the seismic is concerned, okay? But the building code changed in 1998. So anything built prior to that, there is no seismic consideration. For example, here in Japan, it was the mid-1980s, right? They changed the seismic code, something like that. So that time, so anything before that was dangerous. In the US case, similar thing, about 1980 or so, anything built before dangerous. So that's one thing. We know the older building stock doesn't do well. On top of that, there's no license system for contractors or engineers, or no inspection is required by the engineers. So this is the something issue for the actually privately owned buildings. And public owned buildings, they do require those things. The performance is completely different, by the way, which I'm going to show you. Here's a typical building. People live, and many things I see something like this, smooth aggregate or smooth rebar. Those little tiny things, it makes a huge impact in earthquake engineering. Little things like that. Or the buildings, this is what we call soft story. If you see like this, built before 1988, whatever I said, 1998, they can look like this, However, what Turkey did right is the public buildings. This is one of the hospital's pictures. Now, Turkey adopted the law. Any hospitals over 100 beds has to have seismic isolation devices, kind of like Professor Watt is talking about. Seismic isolation devices, essentially you put the roller underneath the buildings. So it's, if the building sits on the ground shakes and building shakes, right? But if you put roller underneath the ground shakes, building is in the same spot. That's the concept. So there are it's about a dozen hospital structures in the epicenter area. They did not get damaged, also it was able to perform to accept the patients after the earthquake. Able to do that. That's pretty amazing. Here's one video, somewhere you can see. So this is the isolation phase where that little brown piece up in there, you're going to see building moving on top. Okay? This is really amazing, actually. Mounting 7.8 and 7.6 back to back, these structures were able to occupied, able to perform the functionality after this major earthquake. So there's technologies available. These kind of things can be done. Now, one more thing I want to kind of mention here is the how the response structure of the Turkish government did, led by Afad. It's probably one of the most robust response I have ever seen. I got there, let's say it was like 2 days after the earthquake. And every city I go, there is the huge tent deployed for the families, well organized. And every village, every town I went, there's an urban search and rescue team organized. I'm talking about within 2 days here. It's really amazing, actually. And also the assessment, they deployed the tens of thousands of engineers on the field in the initial days to do damage assessment of each individual houses or homes or buildings. So they had a QR code stood up. So they assessed pretty much all the damaged structures within about 3 to 4 weeks' time. That's something I have never seen anything like that in my life. And also they activate the commercial private sector contractors to help to remove debris for the urban search and rescue team and remove dangerous buildings, which they're doing that like day 3. And all the roads, everything were open. Like when I was there, everything's open after 2 days actually. So the public infrastructure performed really well. Airport in Hatay, which is a huge damage there, was damaged but opened about 4 days. 4 days, guys. It's pretty amazing things they did. So as far as the response is concerned, it was probably one of the best practices I've ever seen. I think that reason is I believe the Turkey has been essentially preparing for the Istanbul earthquake for so long, ton of 20 million people, you know. So that preparedness really helped. So yeah, preparedness really helps. And one of our really most successful projects in Istanbul a while back was ISMAP program. It's initially financed by the World Bank, working with the Istanbul government. At the time, I was embedded into the part of the Istanbul government to provide the technical assistance to the engineers there. And that time, you know, that particular program strengthened about 2,000 schools and hospitals and administration buildings, an extremely robust program. So that, and it changed the building code and training with contractors and engineers, that really, the impact actually what happened in Turkey today. So we've done a lot of, after that, our activities focused on the moderate damage because Turkish government is really focused on the so-called heavily damaged and collapsed structures. There's 200,000 of them. So we assessed and have a communication campaign with many residences. I think next step here is they're building a lot of buildings right now, but the focus on the medium damage one, I think is very, very important because people love to come back to what they are come from, you know. So that's something that I think started happening there. That's it for me. Okay. Professor Megro. Yes.
Thank you so much, Kit. That was, so next I'd like to invite, yeah, okay, you got it? Okay. Next, I'd like to invite Meguro Sensei to share lessons learned from Japan's greatest earthquake disasters.
Hi, good morning. I'm Kimiro Meguro from the University of Tokyo. So when we look over the last about 100 years, we have several big natural hazards, disasters. This shows the biggest natural hazards in the last 100 years in Japan. Upper part is the past one, and the bottom one, expecting one. The Kobe earthquake and the Great East Japan earthquake disaster are huge, but when I compare using the ratio to the GDP, their ratio was around 3 to 4%. But when you look at the Great Kanto earthquake, the damage was over 40% of the total GDP at the time. Terrible. And this shows the damages in different parameters, number of houses and number of the people who are killed. And many people are using these numbers and explain the impact of the Great Earthquake disaster to the country. But I don't think this is enough. The most important part of this event is, or was, this earthquake changed the country. At the time of the earthquake occurrence, the Taisho era, Japan was aiming to the democratic country. But because of this earthquake, many people believe that the quick reconstruction, recovery of the capital city, Tokyo, was quite important, and strong leadership and control are required. And then, this country changed. Due to only 18 years or 22 years, many events, many accidents happen. All are done by the government. The government are thinking that this is quite important for this country. But when we look over these events, for example, after 18 years, the Pacific War started, and 22 years, World War II ended. More than 3 million of the people were killed, including many civilians. And then, just before these wars, Japanese people spent all of their energy, efforts to the war. Therefore, the national land conservation, national land was not taken care. That's why after the war, World War II, by the annual typhoons, many people were killed. When we check the average number of the people who were killed by the natural hazards per year, from the 1945 to 15 years, 2.4 thousand people were killed every year. And after 30 years, 300. And another 30 years, 150. This is the average number. The latest 30 years, because of the Kobe event and the Great East Japan earthquake event, 900 plus is added. And this lead area, after the World War II, getting the support, financial support from US and the World Bank, Japanese government tried to best to construct infrastructures. And especially from 1955 to 1973, that period is called high economic growth period. Every year, economic growth percent is more than 10% for nearly 20 years. GDP became 6+ times. Your income again becomes 6 times. Because of this, we could reduce a lot the damage. But at the same time, the concentration of the construction of the infrastructure. When we construct the infrastructure during a very short time, it means many structures are getting old at once. This is the current big problem. Okay, the next one, Kobe earthquake. Kobe earthquake, due to the strong ground motion, 105,000 structures are collapsed. 145 structures are partially collapsed. 390,000 structures are slightly damaged. And this shows the direct cause. About 83.3% of the fatalities are killed by the collapse of the structures. And when you calculate 100 minus 83.3, you can have 19.6%. Over 90% of this 16.7 people, that is 15.4, they are found in the burned area. But most of them, yes, they were killed by the fires, but they are trapped under the damaged structures. Therefore, they could not evacuate. If the structure are okay, they did not have to wait for a fire coming. And this one are quite important data obtained by the medical examiners in the Hyogo prefecture. Please look at the top part. More than 90% of the people were killed within the first 14 minutes. According to the medical doctor, this is just 5 minutes because they would like to make the number, round number. Occurrence time of the earthquake was 5:46, 6, 9, 12, 24. Very, very short time, 92% of the people were killed. Therefore, even we had a very nice search and rescue team, it was impossible to save the people. This is the most important lesson that we should study. This is not the Japanese case, but similar. The next one is the Great East Japan Earthquake. The Great East Japan Earthquake, its hazard, external force are quite high, quite large, big. You can see over 3G ground motion attacked the area. And the bottom one, on the right-hand side one, tsunami height over 40 meters. But the structure damage was so minor, and also the number of people who were killed by the tsunami. This is also the world highest survival ratio event. At the time of the occurrence of the earthquake, that was 2:46 p.m., March 11, 2011, we checked how many people are located in a tsunami inundation area. It means later tsunami will attack. And finally, we could obtain that at the time of the occurrence of the earthquake, in the inundation area, 620,000 people are there. Among this number, how many people are killed? 18,000 plus. This is the 3% of the total population in the affected area. Tsunami inundation area. This score is the world highest. And when we check all the municipalities, in the inundation area, the highest area is 12.8%, Rikuzen Takada City. And including whole area of the municipality, the Onagawa-cho, that is the highest, 9.46. But when we check the past in Meiji, Sanrik earthquake, and Showa, and this time, because of the structural and the non-structural countermeasures, the people could reduce a lot, drastically, the damage. But mass media people could not inform this kind of data. This is the final slide. Japanese people, researchers have worked hard to deepen their knowledge and put in place technology and institutional systems, including legal systems, and have steadily reduced the damage caused by similar earthquake or tsunami hazard in the past. In the process, same as in other research fields, the efficiency of the research progress was improved by subdividing the research fields and deepening the research in each field. However, this is the important point. However, on the other hand, the issues that existed between the subdivided research fields were left behind, and the communication among the fields was insufficient. And these problems become apparent in this earthquake and tsunami disasters. And many of the issues that emerged from this disaster could not be solved by combining the results of conventional earthquake engineering and a small number of subdivided research fields, and it became clear that research is needed to combine the results of many related fields. Recovery activities are still in the process, especially in Fukushima Prefecture, where the nuclear power accident happened. The problem behind this are lack of awe and humble feeling researchers towards nature and their blind belief on their scientific knowledge and technologies. This is the most important thing that we should learn from the past Japanese disaster. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Magura-sensei. I think one of the interesting pieces there is that obviously every life counts. And so urban search and rescue after disaster is quintessential for, obviously supporting those that have been injured, but also, saving lives that can be still saved. However, it's not possible to save a huge amount of lives. And in that sense, if you want to save lives, the only thing that really is able to do that is disaster risk reduction. And I think that's also shown in like the Kobe, in 1995, after the Kobe earthquake, there was a medical evaluation that was done, and it was found that most people died within, so 80+% of people died within the first 10 minutes. And so urban search and rescue teams can't really reach people within 10 minutes. And so, allocating funds and continuing to promote disaster risk reduction in all the countries that you work with is quintessential to saving lives. Thank you so much, Magura-sensei, again. And now we're quite excited to learn from Mr. Essine directly about Turkey, being on the ground, being engaged in Turkey's Afad agency, so being really deeply engaged in the response and recovery efforts. We've prepared a few questions for Mr. Essine. So I'll ask the first question. Would you like to join as well, my colleague from the World Bank, to support some of the translation? Right. You've got it there? Okay, fantastic. So we've got a first question, we've got a few questions, and then we'll also, of course, turn it over to you to ask questions. So Mr. Essine, Afad's response to the earthquake was really rapid and robust. It's probably one of the best practices that we've seen in the world in terms of rapid and robust responses. How was this achieved?
Good morning, welcome. My name is Mustafa Essine. I am from Turkey, Afad, Strategy Head of Department. 6 Şubat depremlerini kronolojik olarak bir özetlemeye çalışacağım.
I will try to quickly summarize what happened during this Kahramanmaraş earthquakes in Turkey.
6 Şubat saat 04:17 Kahramanmaraş Pazarcık 7.7 büyüklüğünde. Gene aynı gün saat 4:36 tarihinde Gaziantep Islahiye'de 6.5 büyüklüğünde. Yani aynı gün saat 13:24'te Kahramanmaraş Elbistan 7.6 büyüklüğünde olmak üzere aynı gün 3 büyük deprem meydana gelmiştir.
Last year, actually, 3 major earthquakes occurred on the same day. The first one is the Kahramanmaraş Pazarcık earthquake, which has 7.7 magnitude, and Gaziantep Islahiye earthquake, which have 6.5 magnitude, and the last one, the Kahramanmaraş Elbistan earthquake, happened on the afternoon, has 7.6 magnitude.
04:30'da bölgeye, yani deprem bölgesine diğer illerden arama kurtarma ekiplerimiz sevk edilmiştir. Türkiye plana göre koordinasyon sağlanmış tüm kurumlar AFAD Başkanlığı Afet Yönetim Merkezi'nde toplanmıştır.
Just 20 minutes after the first earthquake, search and rescue teams from the other provinces were dispatched to the region. The coordination was ensured according to the Turkey Disaster Response Plan, and all institutions gathered at the Afad Disaster Management Center.
04:17'de gerçekleşen depremden sonra 45 dakika sonra 05:02'de afet seviyesi 4 olarak ilan edilmiştir.
45 minutes later after the earthquake, disaster level 4 was declared.
05:15'te uluslararası yardım çağrısı yapıldı.
Uh,
Saat 12'de ilk uluslararası yardım Türkiye'ye ulaştı.
At 5 a.m., the call for international aid was made, and at 11 a.m., the first international aid has arrived in Turkey.
Depremden bir saat sonra AFAD ekiplerince Osmaniye'de ilk afetzede canlı olarak çıkarıldı.
1 hour later, the first earthquake, AFAD teams extract the first survivor from the Osmaniye Bilgi apartment.
AFAD merkezde Cumhurbaşkanı yardımcısı 3 bakan, illerde de 14 bakan görev aldı. Diğer bölgelerde de yaklaşık 708 mülki amir görev aldı.
After the earthquake, crisis management office was set up, and which includes the vice president, 3 minister, and many other local officials, which were assigned with these duties and different complementary duties, responsibilities in the region.
11.000 uluslararası olmak üzere 35.000 arama kurtarma personeli, 142.000 güvenlik personeli görev aldı. Deprem bölgesinde toplamda 650.000 personel müdahale ve iyileştirme çalışmalarında görev aldı.
Within the scope of the post-earthquake response activities, 35,000 search and rescue staff, including 11,000 international staff and 142,000 security personnel were deployed into the EQ region. A total of 650 staff took a part in response and recovery of a total of 650,000 staff took part in the response and recovery activities in the earthquake zone.
Afet sonrası 39.000 bina yıkılmış, 200.000 bina ağır hasar almıştır. 11 il, 124 ilçede 39.000 enkazda arama, 26.000 enkazda arama kurtarma çalışması yapılmıştır.
After the earthquake, 39,000 buildings were destroyed and 200,000 buildings were severely damaged. In 11 provinces and 124 districts, search and rescue operations were carried out within the 26,000 debris.
Afet bölgesinde 20.000 araç, iş makinesi, 141 helikopter, 182 uçak, 23 gemi görevlendirilmiş. Hava araçlarıyla sıhhi tahliye, personel nakli, malzeme nakli, yangın söndürme faaliyetleri yürütülmüş. Bu kapsamda 17.500 sorti gerçekleştirmiştir.
20,000 vehicles and construction equipment, 141 helicopters, 182 aircraft, and 23 ships were deployed to the EQ region. Sanitary evacuation and staff transfer, material transfer, and fire extinguishing activities were carried out by the aircraft, and in total, 17,000 flights were carried out in this context.
İlk gün afetzedelerimizin barınması için, acil barınması için çadır kurulumu başlamış. 350 çadır kentte 650.000 çadırda 2,5 milyon kişinin acil barınması sağlanmıştır.
On the first day of the earthquake, the installation of the tents for the shelter of our earthquake survivor has started. In 250 cities, 2.5 million people were provided shelter in 650,000 tents.
2 questions.
Excellent. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next question. Unfortunately, I think we're running a little out of time. So I'll ask the second question, and then maybe we'll open up just for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. The other question that we were very curious to ask Mr. Asin is, there was such extensive damage to private buildings, but the public buildings performed very well. So, what is the reason for such a massive discrepancy? What are the lessons learned from that?
Daha sıkı denetim standartları, kamu binaları genellikle daha sıkı yapı denetimlerinden geçer. daha yüksek yapı standartlarına tabidir. İnşaat sırasında daha titiz kontroller ve denetimler uygulanır.
Actually, there are several factors behind the performance of the public buildings. The first one is related with the structure inspections and the standards. Public buildings in Turkey generally undergo stricter building inspections and are subject to higher building standards. More rigorous checks and inspections are applied during the construction.
Profesör Miyamata slaytta gösterdi. Malatya binasında deprem şeyleri vardı ve deprem hasar almadı hastane.
For example, as shown by Mr. Miyamoto during his slide, as you can see, Malatya Hospital had the seismic isolator.
Thank you Miyamoto. Daha iyi malzeme kalitesi. Kamu binalarında kullanılan inşaat malzemeleri genellikle daha yüksek kalite standartlarına sahip olur. Bu binalarda deprem dayanıklılığını artırır dolayısıyla.
And also construction materials used in the public buildings generally have higher quality standards which increase the earthquake resistance of the buildings.
Mühendislik ve tasarım, kamu binalarının tasarımı genellikle deneyimli mühendisler ve uzmanlar tarafından yapılır. Bu uzmanlar depreme dayanıklı yapı tasarım konusunda bilgi sahibidir ve en güncel mühendislik tekniklerini kullanır.
In terms of the engineering and the design of the public buildings is usually done by experienced engineers and the experts. These experts are knowledgeable about the earthquake resilience building designs and the use of most up-to-date engineering techniques.
Gene Profesör Miyamoto deprem yönetmeliğini 98 dedi ama 99'da bina deprem yönetmeliği Türkiye'de güncellenmiş ve sonrasında daha güvenilir binalar, bütün binalar için geçerliliğini muhafaza etmektedir.
Again, as stated by Mr. Miyamoto's presentation, the change in the earthquake code in the Turkey at the late of the 19th has allowed to government to make sure that most of the new buildings are resilient to the new earthquakes.
Bütçe kaynakları, kamu projeleri genellikle daha büyük bütçeler ve kaynaklarla desteklenir. Bu daha dayanıklı, güvenli yapıların inşasını mümkün kılmaktadır.
Public projects are often supported by the larger budgets and resources, and which makes it possible to build more durable and safe structures.
Kamu binaları depreme dayanıklı standartları gibi yasal zorunluluklara daha sıkı şekilde uymak zorundadır. Bu zorunluluklar binanın güvenliğini artırır.
And also public buildings, must comply more with the strictly and with legal obligations such as earthquake codes, and these obligations increase the resilience of the buildings.
Özellikle eski kamu binaları deprem yönetmeklerine uygun hale getirilmek için güçlendirme çalışmaları olması nedeniyle dayanıklılığı artmış ve depremden daha az zarar görmüştür.
And lastly, the old buildings may have undergone strengthening retrofitting works to comply with the earthquake regulation, and also this situation increased the resilience of the buildings.
Thank you so much. The Turkey earthquake is a real example of how disaster risk reduction works in the public sector, and I think Meguro Sensei always says we need to start looking at disaster risk reduction as a value add and not a cost. And the Turkey earthquake is a prime example because those cities would have been even more destroyed, and all of the public functions, hospitals wouldn't have functioned without these critical disaster risk reduction and resilience efforts that took place in the years before. So I would like to open it up for questions from the audience. Unfortunately, we do not have much time, so potentially we can take one or two questions. So if you have a burning question to any of the panelists, I'd like to turn it over to you. Is there anyone that has that burning question?
Good morning. Thanks for the panel for the interesting discussion. Fred Pedroso, World Bank. A quick question to Miyamoto-san and Wada-sensei. I think there's a clear presentation between both spectrums of not having a plastic structure and base isolation, right? I think Pakistan example is a great example, how can you work with plasticity elasticity for you to have like more reliable infrastructures, where Wada-sensei is saying that that's not very much welcome approach here in Japan. You want something more stiff, of course, working with base isolation. Any comments from your end in terms of where will be, you know, like working with those two ends of the spectrum in terms of technology for developing countries?
So basically what he's asking, basically, is it on? Yeah. So the question is like I talked about base isolation, right? Put the buildings over the roller, which means the building itself will stay elastic. Essentially, the way we design buildings is kind of like a rubber band. If you stretch too much, doesn't come back to neutral spot, you know, kind of snaps. Well, it's better example like a spring. You know, spring, you know, it's just stretch a little bit, you come back to neutral spot. If you stretch too much, it doesn't come back. Now, where we engineer buildings, it's like the stretch way out doesn't come back. For example, in the US, we allowed to have the high-rise construction. I'm talking about 50-story or 70-story buildings to stretch so much, doesn't come back to neutral spot. Shake, stretch, doesn't come back to neutral spot. Allowed to have 1.5% of a total height to be displaced permanently. Think about that. Would I like to live here? Not really. I mean, just technology we use in structural engineering is something we developed in the 1970s, 80s. Never changed for past 50 years. Rely on this, what he's talking about, plastic, this inelastic behavior. It's to me a little bit ridiculous to me, quite frankly. I mean, we have technology exist not to doing that. It probably costs more. It probably add maybe construction cost 2%, 5% more if you use that type of technology not to stretch too much. But sometimes, especially if the earthquake is not happening, we all think we don't want to pay for 2 to 5% more. I'm talking about we here, right? That's a problem. So Japan has 10,000 seismic isolated buildings here. But look how many earthquakes they have here, right? That's why people are keenly aware of the risk. That's why they don't mind to pay for 2 to 5% more. So we have to change the mentality, I do think. But technology is available, can be done very cost effectively.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Abdullah. I'm from Somalia. One of the mayors in Somalia. So, as you may know, that Somalia has been war, conflicts, violences, climate issues, displacement. So I would like to know more about, at the municipal level, building regulations, because we have been facing flooding last year that have lost many lives in our cities. So I need to know more about there is no existing building regulations, there is no existing building codes in our country, and now we are experiencing that the country is recovering. Many people are building long stories that we believe in the future will face a lot of problems without having such building codes and building regulations. So we need your advice at the municipal levels that which way that we can follow. So we believe that we are already ground zero is in our areas. Thank you.
Many countries have their own seismic code or structure standard. But when we check the quality of the structures, many structures are not constructed following the code. So important point is how to let the people follow the seismic code. And generally speaking, there are 3 ways. First, penalty type. If you do not follow, I will give you big penalty. The second, incentive system. If you follow, I can give you some. The third one, disclose the information and let the people, if you do this, this is beneficial for you. The first one, penalty. It is quite difficult to be implemented in the area that do not have strong governance. Even people do not follow, nothing happens. When I give some money to the person, you can easily pass. Such a situation, penalty type cannot be functional. In such area, the incentive type of the one is much better, to be implemented. And also, you had better open information and educate the people. And if you follow this, you can get a big benefit later. And also, if it is possible, you had better have some system, construction permission system, such as electric construction permit system. Then, even the number of the engineers are very limited. The efficiency can be increased, and also all the data, plan, drawing, everything, including the name, who designed this one, who gave the permission, all these are archived. Then when some problem happen, we can trace who is the responsible person. But so far, if you do not have such a system, even the problem happen, nothing happen. Can you understand what I'd like to say you?
Thank you, Sensei. So I think one more question? Okay, yes, I think we can squeeze one more question in. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Thank you, the Turkish brothers from AFAD. My name is Mahmoud. I'm the Commissioner of Somali Disaster Management Agency. As Amir says, Somalia has many hazards like drought and flood, but also some man-made disasters like explosions. So is that coordination more important than quick answer, or the quick answer is help the people? So because AFAD is more, we know that they are very effective, and to learn more about is better for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, very key question around government coordination. How can you facilitate coordination? AFAD is very effective and has been very effective in coordinating such a massive response. What can we learn from that? How can we adopt some of the practices in our own countries that are facing floods and other risks?
Thank you. AFAD'ın kuruluşundan itibaren bu depremlere ve diğer doğa olaylarına hazırlıklı bir şekilde çalışma yapıyoruz. Dolayısıyla biraz önce söylediğimiz gibi Türkiye Afet Müdahale Planı çerçevesinde bu hazırlıklarımız sürekli tatbikatlarla ve çalışmalarla devam ediyor. Bu da bizim hazırlıklı olmamızı ve koordinasyonumuzu güçlendiriyor.
As I stated in our responses, Turkey has been working to prepare for earthquakes and other natural events, especially awaited big Marmara earthquake in Istanbul. So with this preparation and drills and the continuous works in the framework of the Turkish risk response plan, it actually allowed us to, strengthen our preparedness and coordination. So, key message is in that respect, create your own disaster risk management plan, and, just practice it just before any disasters happen with the drills and other kinds of the practices.
Bizim bu plan çerçevesinde 0. dakika dediğimiz bir mottomuz var. Bütün devletin kurumları bu konuda afet olduğundan itibaren görevlerini biliyor ve sahaya hemen operasyonel faaliyetlere başlıyor. Koordinasyonu da Cumhurbaşkanı yardımcımız, gerekirse de Cumhurbaşkanımız başkanlık ediyor.
we have actually have motto of 0 minute, a 0 minute motto in our disaster risk management plans. In the scope of that, all of the state agencies know their duties from the moment where disaster occurs, and immediately they start their operational activities on the field. So it's also important to have leadership and coordination roles to be defined in this respect. So these roles has been carried out by our vice president and if necessary by the ministers. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for your valuable time and for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and a big round of applause and thank you to our speakers today.